Hey, how you doing? I need to check and make sure I'm recording. Okay, all right. Thank you. Welcome to the show. Um, Today, I want to talk to you about mental health. Okay. Again, I apologize if it's backwards, which I'm sure it is, but I want to talk to you about undiscovered mental health issues, subconscious effects of perversion and abuse, and how it can manifest in different ways. I want to talk to you about Sean Combs, okay? And I want to make sure I give you some criteria and red flags to look at, which would strongly indicate that someone is potentially on their way to becoming an abuser. Okay? Because everything can be reversed. So I want to get your minds ready for the terminology of formative years of a child. Okay? And post clinical formative years. That's simply to say what the experts have deemed as the most crucial time in a child's life, where there's a lot of extra brain activity, because a child who is a toddler and starts to walk, there's so many neurons that are firing to teach this child how to make independent choices, how to use their cognitive thinking, um, and that foundation, that period of time, those formative years, can determine what type of personality category or group a child has tendencies to lean toward. And I'm going to do my best to explain some of these terminologies and break it down. Um, Remember, a child in their formative years can go several different ways. Now, according to my thesis, my studies, and my theory, which is independent, I've identified four categories. And within those categories, there's a number of different categories that a child can fit in that can indicate both aptitudes and warning signs about negative thoughts, understanding of the world around them, and behavior that, if not corrected and reversed, like a river going a certain direction, if it's not corrected, you get a Sean Combs. You get an R. Kelly. Now, let me preface this. People like your Epsteins or Epstein, whatever the name is, them island people taking people on other islands. All right. I'm focusing on the African American community, in particular, individuals that have a certain amount of power, influence, followers, and fans that fit into one of the categories that, on a scale of 1 to 100, 1 being fine, 100 being a monster. Okay? Because we get influenced by monsters. Slavery was monstrous. I'm going to say that again, because we have to penetrate our brainwashing. Slavery was heinous and monstrous. Let me tell you what is meant by a monster. A monster is a euphemism, a word that means somebody whose behavior and actions are far beyond just a bad person. Actions and behavior that's inhuman, relatively speaking, to a world population. And that's pretty serious, because you got places where very heinous things are committed, but a monster does things that even on a global scale are inhuman. So, Sean, P. Diddy, Puffy, Diddy, I can't even say the LOVE word and his name at the same time, because it don't fit. I wouldn't give it no strength. The reason why I can isolate and focus on African Americans is because our history is so different. All right? To be treated as chattel during slavery, then following up with Jim Crow laws, then following up with hangings, lynchings, the bombing of Black Wall Street in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all the other towns that were destroyed where black people, even children of slaves, were flourishing, prospering, growing to what was perceived as a superior, relatively speaking, society and community compared to their Caucasian counterparts. Okay? About Sean Combs. Now, once you behave and commit acts that are far beyond just a bad person or a basic run-of-the-mill abusive person, beyond just a pedophile, beyond a rapist, we get into the realm of calculated, premeditated mental anguish, torture, and brainwashing. That's a cocktail mixture to lock somebody into lifelong trauma. There's physical trauma, then there's mental trauma, and then there's emotional trauma. Monsters can do all three. Physical trauma, mental trauma, and emotional trauma. Okay? That's what I'm here to talk to you about. I'm going to try to make a brief distinction between R. Kelly, Sean Combs. Okay? Subtle differences. But the core, the root, has a lot to do with Trump Towers. That's a building. That's just the name. Just the name. Okay. I'm going to touch on Chris Brown. Let me pronounce it better. Chris Brown. Okay? Just 3 examples in this session. Now, without going too deep into detail, I want you to remember there are certain markers that you can indicate both aptitudes, talents, and abilities, and unacceptable behavior, brutal behavior, bullying, and early childhood abuse, which can look very different from its progressed acting out of abuse. Right? I'm going to touch on Chris Brown and Shuge Knight, bearing in mind the conditions and the puppet masters that profit from mental social deviance has a long range effect on the many. The one in a celebrity status affects many when they're in that celebrity status and they're empowered and have money. Okay? Influence. It's like multiplied and multiplied again, the effects. But in my theory, we can identify these early red flag markers, okay, and guide a child because they're still in the formative years. In my scale, I have a category that I call formative independent thought. Before that, there's formative experimental. Then there's formative emulative, which is the word for imitating. In the formative category, you can guide the child. But any youth can be guided on the right track. It's just easier when we know where to push them, where to prohibit them, where to encourage them or discourage them from doing something when they're in those formative years. Okay? So let's look at, according to my theory, Sean Combs. This is my notebook, incidentally. Let you get a close up. All right? This is where I make notes. Okay? I've only got like about 5 pages filled out specifically for this. So I just want you to know what I'm telling you I didn't read in the book. It's my own theories based on other proven behavioral abnormalities. All right? Abnormalities, I think that's the word. Some of you scholars out there can, correct me. We're going to look at Sean Combs' formative years. Okay? We're going to look at the maternal influence more than the paternal influence. First, let me debunk any and all of the YouTube posts and videos that have, even if it's inadvertently, uh, promoted the urban legend about his father. He cannot be compared to famous gangsters or drug dealers. You have second rate, third rank people who are involved with criminal activity. Just because they are connected in some way with a notorious and successful famous gangster or dope dealer, that doesn't mean that they are. You got minions, you got runners, and then you got the lowest level of criminal. It's all crime, but it's just a big difference between the famous gangsters and dope dealers and the individual that, let's just say, goes out and recruits potential addicted individuals or predatory targets for human trafficking and child trafficking. Diddy's father was pretty close to that last level. So, the maternal influence, his mother. We have to look at what we know, what we have seen, and then speculate to come up with what might have happened. Okay? So I'm gonna say it like this. There are women who roll with criminal activity, criminal behavior, criminal thinking, or criminal assistance, affiliation, okay, accessories. So, there are some women that view human sexuality as something that benefits an individual either emotionally or financially. And that's the example. That's how they think. Okay? This is beyond the boundaries of normal intimacy. So, let's take certain women, that's maternal, that have a distorted understanding of desire and are completely confused about what lust is. Because people, probably a minority, there's people that will call lust and even perversion love. There's that word. Okay? Love is never selfish. Love is never abusive. Love is never exploitive. Love is a giving thing. Okay? It's a sacrificing thing where you sacrifice of your time, your feelings, your trust. Okay? So now, thinking about these particular women that their idea and practices in sexuality are not normal. That's the best way I can put it. So let's just suppose. Let's suppose a impressionable child, male, knows what a father is, but doesn't have that father in their life at all. Deceased. Now, if the maternal parent has a very twisted idea of what's okay sexually, odds are very high that the child will adapt and subscribe to what his primary parental unit thinks or does physically. Okay. Some of you can probably guess where I'm going. I'm forming a profile. Okay. Comparison. So, if this child has been taught a very unique, unusual, definitely not common physical bond with a parental unit, they don't know that what they're being taught or becoming addicted to or feel is normal. They don't know that it's abnormal. Okay. The end result, if that river isn't diverted in another direction, they not only will practice abnormal, unusual, detrimental practices, they might embrace it. And that becomes their first example of the closest thing to love. But it ain't love. It's primal, it's selfish, it's exploitive, and it's often abusive. All right? So, if you look at Sean's face, pictures or footage, you can see there is some retardation in his expression. If you ain't looking for it, you won't notice it. But it's there. You can compare it to others. Remember, this is just a theory. So now let's put together, I'm not mentioning no names right now. I'm being very careful because this is all theory. But if an individual, child, no father post their formative years, a mother who has a unique sense of what is okay to do physically, put these together, heighten with ambition from the maternal unit to which the child came from. Ambition. Money and power more important than human life or human decency or communal decency. I'm talking about ambition now, right? Beyond the ambition that one seeks when they go to college or when they get a job and they want to excel. Now you got a cocktail. Remember that word. You got a cocktail that creates a thinking that creates an environment. I describe an environment as more than the surrounding area of space. I call an environment the energy feeling, the frequencies, the electricity that you can feel when something ain't right. Can't explain it. It's documented that many people will get a certain feeling when something ain't right, and they have no reason to think that it's not right. Prime example, popular example is if you're in the basement of a building, say the parking area, and there's an elevator to take you up to the first floor. You're down there with all the cars. It's only one elevator. You go to the elevator, and there's a stranger standing next to you. And the stranger looks perfectly normal, maybe even dressed professionally. But you get this unexplainable feeling in your soul, your center, your heart, okay? You get this feeling that something ain't right. And you're not a hypochondriac and you're not a paranoid person. You may have even been in the elevator many times before and there's people around. But this time, you just got this feeling. Studies show you should trust that feeling. Hey, I acknowledge people, for liking. Just let you know. That feeling, the professional advice is if you have a feeling, follow it. Don't get on the elevator. If that person gets on the elevator, don't get on the elevator. Wait. Because if there is no threat, so what? But what if that inner part of you, that scientists, social scientists, and social psychologists, sociologists haven't been able to define in scientific terms, if that feeling is an instinct, like most animals have instincts. They don't have the communication skills that we have. They don't have language the way we do. They live and survive by instincts. In a big way, we're animals. We're just more advanced. Okay? When you get that feeling, trust it. Don't take a chance. Mice run off a ship that's going to sink. How do we know this? People describing the behavior of the mice that normally stay on a ship for a voyage and see them leave the ship, and lo and behold, either the ship sinks in a storm or by attack, or unequivocally there is a storm. The ship might survive, but just barely. So check out this detail. There can be a storm in a voyage down the line, and the mice didn't run off the ship. Then, see, this is this subtle thing. There's documented observations of mice that left the ship, and although it didn't sink, it was in a storm. where it almost sank and they just barely made it. All the captains keep a log. That's how they learn. That's an instinct. Okay? So now, if someone has a distorted view of affection, affection can be shaking somebody's hand with two hands. Affection can be pat on the shoulder, pat on the back. That's affection. Of course, affection can be a hug. Doesn't have to be sexual. That's affection. Okay? If the child grows up with a distorted understanding of affection, doesn't know what real intimacy is, but they've been exposed to sex, they potentially can become either a predator or abuser or a pedophile. Okay? So, some of the powers that be have found that to control a group of people, it's easier to manipulate someone who has lived under conditions that are dysfunctional. And that's a broad statement, but it's a definite statement. And there's tons of information, cases that can be studied that show a parallel between coming from a dysfunctional family and individuals that hurt, harm, bully, and abuse. And ultimately, sometimes unalive. I love saying those terms that somebody came up with. I don't have to, but I do it. It's a attention getter. So, this is what I want you to take with you. Not every mental illness is visible or easily identifiable, but there are always what is called markers, red flags. A red flag is more observable and detectable than a marker. So if you're looking for markers, that's the subtle things, you're watching more closely, and if a red flag just pops up really quick, you'll see it. Because you're already looking that direction. Because you know there's such thing as markers to indicate there's something wrong with the child. If we catch it at an early stage, we can change the course of that river. All right? So that's what I wanted to say. I hope you remember this, so when I get out my dry erase board and I start doing more details, because for me, the important thing is how do we either correct something that turns into a Diddy or R. Kelly. I'm sorry for using them as examples, but this is important to me. And preventing behavior that these type of individuals feel is perfectly okay, perfectly acceptable. It's not. Okay? Dictatorship is not acceptable. All right? locker talk that's demeaning, that is expressing assault, is not acceptable. And there's something wrong when you have leaders that hold up someone that displays those type of traits and tendencies. There's something wrong. I'll leave it up to you. Thank you very much. I enjoyed this because it was on my heart. And I hope you're around or follow me when I just start breaking down some of the positive things we could do to children when we see those markers or those red flags. All right. As always, I love you much. I love humanity. I think there's always hope for a human being. I doubt if there's hope for a monster. Thank you guys. Peace out.